You've been welcomed. Let's move on to achieving the vision. We've been exceedingly fortunate in having a number of people with expertise and wisdom and ideas and enthusiasm to pull from. Two of them you're going to meet tonight. You may have heard from them before. I guarantee there is some interesting information and energy here that we have pulled from. Our first gentleman, Bryan, you're kind of new to this bunch here, I believe. Bryan is from Yakima, but you're going to chat primarily focused on Prosser?
Yes.
So we'll get a little bit of two places. Prosser, those of you who know it, another small town. So there may be some things we can pick and glean from his experiences there. Bryan Ketchem, come talk to us.
Well, thank you very much. So what I'd like to do is, a fair bit of this will be just providing an overview of the agency and what we do, and then be able to talk a little bit more about our development efforts in Prosser, kind of more generally. So bear with me as we just go through. So my name is Bryan Ketchem. I'm Director of Catholic Charities Housing Services, and I've been the director there since 2009. And we just celebrated this year our 20th anniversary, just last month. And we got our start in multifamily housing right here in Chelan, actually. Casa Guadalupe was the first development that it had already been built, but we acquired it back in 2000. It had been run down a little bit. It hadn't been properly managed and needed some rehab after just 5 or 6 years in operations. And that was really kind of our launching point. But one of the key things about our agency and our founding board of directors was that they had a vision that they didn't want to begin and end with just affordable housing. They wanted there to be a resident services component into the work that we did, and there wanted to be an opportunity for home ownership. And so as you look, we've kind of built out over the last 20 years a wide variety of services, and it makes a lot of, there are a number of Catholic charities, specifically in Washington. All of them are very heavily involved in housing. What makes us unique in Central Washington is that we're the only one that has a home ownership program, where we work with families. It's a sweat equity program to help them build and own their homes. And so that component is what makes us probably very unique in terms of small housing agencies. Of course, we're part of a larger Catholic Charities agency that serves Central Washington, that serves 7 counties in Central Washington. And so we're part of a bigger whole, and one of the things that we're working on collectively is kind of how do we integrate services at our housing sites to other services being provided by Catholic Charities. And I'll circle back to that when we come back to Prosser. So here are just a few of our housing sites. These are our locations for multifamily housing. We have 23 different communities in 4 counties in Central Washington, predominantly in Yakima and Grant County. We have just over 800 units for multifamily housing. About 85% of that portfolio is serving farm workers and their families. And then about 10%, just over 10% is senior elderly. We currently have 3 independent living housing sites, 1 in Yakima, 1 in Prosser, and 1 in Benton City. I won't spend much time on this. This slide just talks about, when you think of affordable housing, one of the pieces is that affordable housing is really central to community development. So it's not just providing an opportunity for families to live in a safe and affordable, healthy home. It's also an economic driver. It creates jobs in the community. It supports jobs in the community in the long term. And so this slide just talks about what that impact is for our agency over the last 2 years, just in terms of having built 60 single-family homes and then completed construction on just over 110 multifamily units. So it's creating, in terms of like 1-year impact, is creating and supporting over 280 jobs throughout Central Washington. And then there's an ongoing impact once it's up and in construction. So we really see that as part of a broader community development effort. To give you a sense of the magnitude of the need, we're in Central Washington, we're the largest provider of farm worker housing as an agency. And yet, when we look at the need just in Yakima and Klickitat County alone, there's an estimated need for 13,000 units of farm worker housing. In those two counties, we have about 480. So that's good in terms of job security, but it's not good in terms of, collectively as a group and as communities addressing the needs that are there. And this does not take into account affordable workforce housing, senior elderly housing. This is specific to farm workers. So there is a tremendous need, as you all know, right? That's part of why we're here. One of the things to highlight is that each one of our multifamily sites has a community center, similar to this, where we're able to coordinate and deliver service programs at our sites. So we have 5 main areas of focus there that you'll see: crime prevention, education, health and nutrition, community engagement, and economic opportunities. And then there's kind of just a list, I won't read through them all, of services provided. We spend about 65% of our time on services in the field of education, and that is really from birth through college and beyond. Actually, we provide adult basic education for a lot of our families, computer literacy skills, financial planning, budgeting classes. But what we're seeing is that over the last 4 years, we've been measuring graduation rates among our housing sites. We started with 3 sites, and now we're currently tracking 10 of our housing sites. So these are all farm worker families, all very low income. And what you can see is that our high school graduation rate this last year was 93% of graduating seniors, which is really phenomenal. It's something that we're very excited about. If you aggregated that data over the last 4 years, I think the average is about 89%. So this year was certainly a banner year for us. But when you look at those communities themselves within the school districts, the graduation rate is about 78% for the entire school district. And statewide is between 78 and 80%. So we're by far, having a positive impact on families and helping families move out of poverty. So this is a long-term process. It takes a lot of years to be able to do that. But what we're seeing is that with that combination of affordable housing and the availability of services and connecting families to opportunities, we're not the gatekeeper to all those opportunities. We don't provide them all. We work with partnerships with a lot of different organizations to do that. But that when you do that and you do that well, that you do have these outsized impacts in the community. And what's even more astonishing is our goal is we started tracking post-secondary enrollment rates. So these are the rates of those that graduated. Did they go on to either a trade school, a community college, or a 4-year university? And this last year, we had 90% of high school seniors going on. Now, the average in the school districts is about 44%, and the statewide average is around 65%. The state data is trailing a little bit from ours in terms of published data from 2015 and 16. But again, we're seeing these really positive outcomes. And one of the things that we're trying to do now as we continue to build this out is track the graduation rates for those that are going into post-secondary. So are they staying in school? Because we know the dropout rates are tremendously high for low-income families and certainly immigrant families that are going on. But that transition from high school to college is a challenging one. And it's one where a lot of the parents find it very difficult to be able to help their kids. Because for our farm worker families, 77% of the parents have not graduated high school. So they have no concept of college. They don't really understand how to help navigate those college systems. Imagine trying to fill out a financial aid form in a foreign language. And trying to be of assistance to your kids. So this is an area that we've been able to really kind of focus on and help support those families and the youth going to those, going on to college. With our single family program, again kind of quickly, we built and sold just over 180 homes to date. The majority of those are all, currently they're all in Yakima County. That's really just for practical reasons. We had a partnership with a local general contractor, and we try and keep our build groups within about an hour's drive of Yakima. for efficiency purposes, although we are trying to expand now and move into Grant County and hopefully up into Chelan Douglas here in a few years. So it takes a lot of time and planning, but we are looking to expand our footprint as we provide those opportunities. And one of the nice things here is that what we've seen is about 20% of our homeowners, so 20% of those 180 have either come from our affordable housing sites or affordable housing from like a local housing authority or other housing provider. So again, we're seeing that having access and opportunity to affordable housing not only stabilizes families' living situations, but then also can help them progress into home ownership and building assets and moving out of poverty. So we really see that as a core function of our work. I won't spend a lot of time on this. We just have two different sweat equity models that meet different families' needs. Just very, very quickly, one is requires 250 hours of sweat equity, where families are only required to work on their own homes. And they basically, it's a program that a family can become a homeowner with no money down. So we cover their closing costs if they put in, and they meet the sweat equity requirement. The other is a mutual self-help program, and that's substantially more intensive. Families put in 1,000 to 1,200 hours on their homes. They're required to do at least 30 hours a week. And these homes are built in a build group. So each family signs an agreement that no family can move into their home until all of the homes in that build group are completed, and that they agree that they'll work on each other's homes. And so the nice thing about that program is that you're building community while you're building homes. And the families, what's remarkable about that program and why we like it so much is that you're building confidence while you're doing this. We've worked with single moms, with young families that were committed. They worked with their parents, their cousins. We started a group of 4, and we had one group that was all 4 single moms. And they started construction in November. And they worked throughout the entire winter. They had their dream was to reach home ownership. They never imagined that they would possibly be building their own homes in the process of getting there, right? But having gone through that process, you see not only their confidence grow, but what does that mean for their kids, for their daughters, to see their mom out there with a nail gun in the middle of winter framing their home, right? It's a powerful image for young kids. So it really is transformative in that process. I just have a few pictures here to give you a sense of, and I don't think, I think you already well know what some of the affordable housing needs and issues are in the communities. These are some examples of farm worker housing in particular, off farm on the campsite. Again, just really quickly, this was an image of farm worker housing on the west side, but it was featured in an article by the Seattle Times. And then you just see living conditions that we're familiar with and that we really are working to resolve within the communities. And just by contrast, this is one of our oldest housing sites. This is Buena Nueva. It's now 16 years old. So it looks very similar. We just repainted it 2 years ago, so it really does have the same color scheme as what you're seeing here. But it's a 26-unit farm worker development. This is a fairly recent development in Granger, Washington. We completed that in 2015. 51 units of farm worker housing. What's really exciting here with this development is that it was the first time that we incorporated exercise equipment for parents. So you have this play area for kids, and then you'll see in the foreground there is exercise equipment for parents so that you can actually work out while watching your kids play. And so that was our very first kind of effort, again, as we were trying to promote health and nutrition at the sites and looking at ways that we could be creative and encourage that. One of the things that we've also done, and I'm sure that, John will get into a little bit later, is some of the ways that you can create integrated design processes and include like xeriscaping as a way of both conserving water and resources, but it also conserves operating costs for the property, as you have fewer spaces that you need to maintain or mow or irrigate or fertilize. And so it has a broader impact even than just the development itself. And then this here are images of our St. Anthony Terrace in Prosser that we talked about. Our efforts in Prosser really began back in 2007 and 2008. So this has been a long process. We had some community opposition that we had to work through and overcome from a zoning and annexation process that took several years. This is part of a 3-phase development. It's on one site that's just over 12 acres. And this was really our first development where we tried to have a much more integrated process. So the first phase was 51 units of farm worker housing and workforce housing. And then a second phase that's still in process is 27 single-family homes. And then the third phase was St. Anthony Terrace. But timing-wise, phase 3 went before phase 2. So we have yet to build the 27 single-family homes, but we hope to start construction here this spring. But really the intent here is that you have families, younger families that are stabilizing in their housing. You have families that have worked and been provided that opportunity to achieve homeownership. And what better example of what you can do to continue that hard work than to have those homes be built right next door to where you're currently living. And then with the senior elderly, provides a great opportunity to bring the kids that we're providing services to at our multifamily sites and bring them over and integrate them with the senior elderly. And one of the things that we did, for instance, is while this development was in construction, is we had kids do small pieces of art to welcome the seniors, and so we hung those throughout the development. At each floor, there's little pieces of art from the kids next door, which is really great. And this is our first year. We leased up in January, so this will be our first kind of holiday season where we hope to bring kids through and really draw that connection and keep the seniors, engaged in community and also providing ways that they can give back, right, by helping mentor younger kids and help with homework and really just provide that loving attention that the kids so crave. These are just a couple of images of some of our groundbreaking for our New Life Homes, which is our single-family housing program. And then the upper right picture is our very first subdivision. We did 32 homes in a small community called Mapton, which is one of the poorest communities in Yakima County, and it's a population of about 2,000. So we were putting in 32 single-family homes in our very first attempt to do home ownership, which is like building 10% of the housing stock in the community. So it took us a while, and we learned a lot through that process. Probably most importantly was that we learned that the families we wanted to help get into home ownership didn't already pre-qualify for those loans, right? And so in the process, we became a HUD certified housing counseling agency, and that's really what helped us build out our pipeline. Was we helped families begin to establish or repair credit and become pre-qualified home buyers. And so in doing that, part of our subdivision is that we had worked with the city, and we promised that we would also develop a community park as part of the subdivision. So again, so that's very broadly our agency. There's a couple of the gals that were working in the middle of winter at our development in Granger. This was back in 2013. I think, just switching gears, this is really the end of the slideshow, but to talk a little bit more about the challenges with doing independent living and the opportunity is to connect that with assisted living. So I know that Amanda and I have had some conversations around looking at what are some creative ways that you can partner to be able to finance those types of development. Because one of the things that we know is, while the bulk of our portfolio serves farm workers and their families, yes, that's a priority for us, but so is providing for the broad continuum of community need. And one of the challenges we face as housing developers is that we can only develop what we can get funded, because the funding sources aren't coming from the Catholic Church, These are funding sources that we compete with other agencies for that are federal dollars or state dollars. And in the bulk of these cases, it's also combined with 2 or 3 other funding sources. So you have many different layers that you're working with. And the biggest driver of that is the low-income housing tax credit program. And right now, as we're looking at doing more senior elderly development, it's a competitive application process that's available to both for-profit and nonprofit developers. But seniors don't score high. And so it's very difficult to get those developments funded because the top 2 priorities right now for the state are homeless housing and farm worker housing. And so those 2 populations are what's predominantly being served through that program. And that's a real challenge because as we're looking at these, the demographic shift that's already been occurring, we're probably at least 10 years behind the build curve on that, is an aging population. And so that's really creating these new and growing challenges within communities. And so the exciting thing, I think, is that it's having the opportunity to share some of the challenges, but also to hear what some of those ideas are, so how we can partner and begin to solve that. Because the funding sources are so scarce that it really takes good partnerships and many partnerships to be successful in this endeavor. And that's not just at the community level. I mean, as we're looking at developments, you have to have good partnerships in terms of development consultants, in terms of attorneys, architects, engineers. It really is a very big team that comes together to make these developments happen. So I'm happy to take questions a little bit later, but now I'd like to turn it back.
Thank you.